Well, we'll get started. And, one of the main purposes and hopes for this is to demystify and get really specific about the application process. We are recording tonight so that folks who couldn't join us live will have a chance to listen as well. That could also influence your decision about coming on camera or not, I suppose. Fair enough. I'm gonna introduce you to the other folks who are here on the page 73 side of things with me. I'm Michael Walkup, I'm the artistic director. Joining me are Kari Olmon, our associate producer. Hi, Kari. And Bleu Beckford-Burrell, who's our 2021 page 73 playwriting fellow. Hi, Bleu. So any of your questions tonight, you'll be able to direct to any of us. What we're gonna do is I'm gonna go through the whole application, and Kari has some frequently asked questions prepped, and the answers to them, all of which is meant to just give you time to think about what your specific questions might be. And Bleu, of course, is here to speak to her own experience, both applying for and now as a person who's gone through actually all of our development programs at this point, with more to come, more production anyway to come. All right, so every year, page 73's application for the fellowship and typically for Interstate 73, it's really how we meet the vast majority of playwrights that we've ever worked with ever. There is no specific tie between the application process for our development programs and our productions, but it really must be said that the development programs application is the strongest, most robust, most paid attention to pipeline for introducing playwrights to page 73. And really, the majority of our productions end up coming out of the playwrights we meet through our writers group, our fellowship, and our residencies. It's unusual times, it's a specific year. The application this year is in many ways the same as always, but there's a very significant difference, which is that when you apply this, when you fill out your application this year for the 2022 program, you're really only able to apply for the fellowship. And that's simply because we aren't naming a new Interstate 73 writers group next year. The group who applied this past April, who we named them to a 2-year opportunity. We wanted to honor their applications that came in during COVID, while also acknowledging that there had been a slowdown in what we were able to offer, and to give them the full experience, we really felt we needed to give them a year on Zoom and followed up by a real year in person, which will for them be next year. So rather than waste anyone's time with applying for programs we didn't have, we thought that was the best choice to extend them. But here's the consequence of that, which is that this year we aren't opening an application for the 22 Interstate 73 group. That said, we are opening proudly, happily, an application for the 2022 page 73 Playwriting Fellow. That is the most prestigious award we have to give out. It was founded as an award way back in 2004. And some of our absolute favorite writers have come through the fellowship program, including the one here with us right now, Bleu. So the award, as you might know, comes with a $10,000 cash prize for the playwright, as well as a $10,000 development budget, which the playwright works with the staff, primarily with me and Kari, on designing how they're going to spend that money to best further their writing, their careers, specific projects, multiple projects, professional introductions. When life resumes, I always love traveling to like a festival with the playwrights. Bleu and I didn't get to go like rip up the Humana Festival this past April, but I think you'll be coming along with the 2022 fellow in April of 22, assuming things are back in order. So it's a really holistic relationship between the fellow and the company. And it's a really important one, and it's a singular opportunity, of course. So I am going to share my screen and just briefly talk through the major elements of the application, just to get the sort of facts out there and add a few details about sort of how we view the application before we move forward. So here I go, smooth stage management, no doubt. Sharing my screen. Okay, so when you go to page73.org/application, you can find this embedded form. The deadline this year is Monday, June 28th. At the end of the day, we call it 11:59 p.m. There's a description of the fellowship, a little more in detail than what I just said, but basically what I just said. The eligibility requirements for the fellowship are that you're living in the US. We say you've completed 2 plays or 3 one-acts. The idea is that the fellow is at a certain point in their writing career where they're really committed to professional playwriting, not so much just having written their first play. There is actually, we work with early career playwrights, but there is actually such a thing as, I think, being too green for this particular program. All of Page 73's programs are for playwrights who have not yet had their professional off-Broadway premiere, which we often use the equity showcase code as that's still okay if you've had a showcase code, but if you've had an equity fully contracted production with health and benefits for the actors, that's how we would define a professional production. If you have any questions about your own eligibility along those lines, please feel free to email us at info@page73.org. And we don't want our fellow to be a full-time student at the same time that they're doing the fellowship. So this year's timeline for notifying applicants, just a little delayed from a typical year, but not too much. By the fall, we should be letting everyone who becomes a semifinalist, which is usually between 12 and 15 playwrights, know. And then in early December, we'll identify 3 to 5 finalists, interview them, have them submit more paperwork, and name the fellow. We'll let the fellow know by the end of the year, and then we'll publicly announce the fellow in January of 2022. So you use this online form to submit. It's not fancy enough to like save your work and come back to it. You kind of got to get everything together and then submit it all at once. And what all of it is, what the forms are, is the completed online application. That's what you're going to be writing in here. The letter of intent. I do want to spend a moment on this part of the application. It's a very, very, very significant part of the application. I often say that, the fellowship is it's an award you apply for. It is not a writing award necessarily. We of course have to be inspired and inspired by and love your writing. We think the writing by our fellows is some of the best there just simply is. And yet you have to successfully complete a full application to really be competitive for the fellowship, not simply have writing that we enjoy. And really what I mean by saying that is that your letter of intent has to do a pretty stellar job of introducing yourself to us and letting us know what your goals and challenges are. So the first question, introduce yourself beyond your resume. We have a chance to read your resume. We have a chance to see the titles of what you've written, but the types of things you could tell us about yourself only in this prose form. What are you interested in writing about? What drives you to playwriting? That's the type of introduction that's going to really sing in a great letter of intent. Questions 2 and 3 are parallel intentionally. What do you consider to be your greatest artistic challenge, and how would the fellowship help you address that or these? And then what do you consider your greatest professional challenge, and how would the fellowship address this or these? And that's another, that harkens back to the idea, it's an application. You're saying, I'm a writer, I'm pursuing this, I have these goals, I have these challenges, and this opportunity that Page 73 has to offer, which comes with, of course, money, but also network and the development funds, it's going to help me address these needs, challenges, the things I'm working on, the things I want to grow towards in these ways. And so I want you to think of it like an application like that. Another way to put this with the letter of intent is a straightforward artistic statement that you've maybe had to prepare for other sort of general applications, where you simply explain your goals as a writer and your wishes for the world. It's not really going to cut it for the fellowship, because we want you to take that same spirit and then have the self-awareness around where page 73 in our fellowship is going to come in and really make an impact on you and your career and your writing. So then for the writing itself, you'll be submitting a 10-page sample and then the full script from which that sample comes. And we'll talk a bit more about sample selection later on. That's always a big question that comes up. And finally, you'll upload a playwriting resume. So just to give you a quick preview, if you're watching this Zoom, about what the application form is, you can of course see this. It's some pretty straightforward information. And again, you can't save your work as you go. So you just want to sort of take a look at it and make sure you have all this ready. And then when you get to the point where you're uploading your samples, your letter of intent, your resume, please have them all saved as PDFs. All right, Kari, I hand it to you now. And I'll take over the waiting room.
Wonderful. All right, we're just going to jump into a few commonly asked questions that we often get about the application that Michael and I and Bleu will sort of preemptively answer here for you. So one of the most regular questions we get is, if I applied last year, can I submit the same play again this year? And the answer is yes. Yes, you may. You know, it probably doesn't hurt to send an updated draft if you put more work into it, re-envisioned it. That can always make for a stronger application, but we will not be going back to compare that it is identical or it has been revised. So you are welcome to submit the same play as last year. Michael touched on this in his overview, but we're also asked, does the sample need to be the first 10 pages of the play? And yes, it does, because if the sample catches a reader's interest, they may go on to look at the full script. And later in our evaluations, we often consult the full things. So if you send a sample and a script that don't agree with each other, someone will be contacting you down the line.
I just want to jump in, Kari.
Yeah.
I think maybe either, I don't know, there's a glitch or something. It doesn't, you're saying the sample has to come from the same play as the full script, not that the sample has to be only the first 10 pages. In fact, it could be from any place in the script. Yes. Yes, okay. Just they have to come from the same work. Okay.
Yes. Thank you for clarifying, Michael. And now, since we are so lucky to have Bleu joining us here tonight, Bleu, I would love for you to start with, do you have any advice for applicants?
I had time to think about this, and I'm like, did not come up with what I would assume is good advice. I think the best advice I can give, which I've heard in the past when I was on the other side of this screen, like looking at the person who is a fellow talking about how to do the application, is honestly just, in a way, it's like treating this one like a journal entry. That's the best way I can describe it. It's not like other submissions where you're doing like the route artistic statement. It's really like, where am I emotionally with my work? What am I feeling vulnerable about? And what do I think I can really get from this opportunity? And I think like the more authentic and genuine with those questions, is the better application. At least that's what I did. Like, it was just like, where am I right now? How am I feeling? What do I need in this very moment that would make me feel better as a playwright? And yeah, so I think that's the best advice. Just like really, really tuning into like where you are honestly in this moment.
Thank you, Bleu. And you are all welcome to ask us your own questions, whether that is by turning on your camera and using the raise hand function. You're also welcome to drop your questions in the chat, and we'll see them that way as well. So please don't be shy with your questions. And while While you're thinking of your questions, another one for Blue. I know you've had an unusual year with us so far, but could you still give the folks listening a sense of what you've been working on during your fellowship so far?
Yeah, sure. It has been strange. But one of the things I wanted to tackle during my fellowship time was getting the first draft done of this play that I've been working on for a few years, called Crosses. And so that became like priority. And actually, I was finally able to like actually get the first draft done. And it's in a pretty decent place. And I'm really excited about like continue to work on it. And so like, I think the next thing is kind of like this very, very big project, which is on the like is on the agenda for what's next for me to work on during this fellowship. But yeah, so I think that's it. That's all I'm gonna say.
No, that's great. Thank you, Blue. It's an exciting, ambitious project, and we know we're all looking forward to getting back to working in person so we can start tackling it together. So, see, other questions were often asked. Oh, yes, we're getting some questions. Yes.
I think Catherine Gwynn turned on her camera to ask a in-person question.
I love it. Please.
I did, yes. Hi, I am Catherine Gwynn. I use she, her, and they, them pronouns. And I wanted to ask Blue if you feel comfortable answering, if you wouldn't mind going into more specific about how you kind of talked about the challenges that you face in sort of your career right now, because personally, I at least find that a difficult element sometimes to talk about, mostly because I'm an emerging playwright without an MFA. And so it feels like the challenge sometimes is like everything. And so, but the way you spoke about it being more like a journal entry really was helpful. So I wonder if you feel comfortable just saying, how you what specific challenges did you name, or how did you talk about that?
Sure. Also, just to throw it out there, I don't have an MFA in playwriting. I have no classes in playwriting. So, so it's definitely not about that. That shouldn't be like a hindrance. At least for me specifically, like this was happening during a time, this application was happening during a time that like the COVID pandemic had like just taken us. I'm gonna say taken us. And before that, I was in a place of where I was feeling very doubtful and very aware of the equity issues in the theater. And so like I spent my application kind of talking about what it's like for me as a Black woman in the industry, and like what I hope to have change. And that's what I mean, where it's like, it really does feel like a journal entry, because I'm not necessarily talking about those things in most of my applications, but I think I also just came to a point where I was just like, this is where I'm at. This is what needs to be addressed. And I really want to work with a company or organization that finds this important. And so like, that's what I wrote about.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add that I so specific. I mean, I think I can probably say I remember every letter of intent from the fellows these past 10 years that I've been here, because they're always so striking. But I think I want to acknowledge that there is a complicated thing we're asking for in this letter of intent around self-aware, and I think the word vulnerable came up. We're a company that has resources to offer you as a writer. And then we're saying, and can you please be vulnerable in asking for them? Yeah. I understand that can potentially slip into sort of like a not great dynamic, but there is, as Blue absolutely proved, as probably many successful applicants, and definitely our fellows has proven, there's a way to to stand in your own artistry wherever you're at, whatever your challenges are. You know, an artistic challenge doesn't need to be unique, or a professional challenge is probably similar for a lot of folks in the career moment that Page 73 is designed to help. So it's not about sort of cracking some sort of like, no one's ever said this before, but just being honest with yourself so that we can see that we'll be able to also be honest and like apply the resources and really make the impact that we want to. But it's, I get, like, I really do get it. I get, like, I love this letter of intent so much. It's asking a lot of the writers. It really is. I actually remember, Bleu, you sort of said in your letter of intent, like, all right, these things are always a lot. And I'm sort of like on a, you know, I think you put yourself on a bit of a strict diet around which ones you were gonna do or not, because they do ask a lot. And I do want to acknowledge that. But yes, sorry, so many other questions. This is really fun. Do we do the hand raising ones?
Yeah, we've got a couple more hands up. Ella Rose, let's go to you. I see your hand raised.
Hi. I also share one of the questions in the chat, which is the question about musicals. I know that you guys have picked people for the I-73 program before, but I don't think there's ever been musical fellow, and or like a musical, I mean, or a team, certainly. And so I was just curious about that, and about if there are things that make musical applications more or less competitive, given the nature and structure of the program. And another question I had was about the transparency of around the process of like who the readers are, and how, like, what that process looks like, or like how many sort of layers are there to that cuts. And I'm also curious about that because I wonder how we go about choosing the 10 pages, like what kind of, if it's not, doesn't have to be the first 10 pages, like who's reading those 10 pages and how do we kind of think about that? So thank you.
You're taking it, Kari, no? What we have musicals, we have our panel and choosing the 10 pages. Oh, Ella Rose, you had another point in there, and it was,
was that all of them?
Yeah, right. If there's something that makes musicals less competitive for the fellowship, and what would help folks for doing that?
All right, I'll do musicals, Kari. You can do panel and choosing the 10 pages. Okay, deal. Musicals. Okay, and actually I had another question come to me in the chat about collaborators in general. So I'll say the thornier answer first, which is this really is best designed as an individual award for a writer to push them forward. That doesn't have to preclude collaborations with other folks, but the award absolutely is going to go to the writer who's applying. If there's let's say your book and lyrics, if there's a composer, that person is going to, of course, benefit if the fellowship resources are going towards workshops of this piece, but I wouldn't consider it a co-equal relationship. Now, that said, we have had composer and book lyricists apply together where both of them are sort of like artistically interested in the fellowship and finding a way to complete that LOI thoughtfully together. It's possible. It's not a hugely common thing that's happened, but we have had in our writers group, I think twice, we've had book and music duos, and that's been great. And that's been really fun. And they did apply together as a unit. Now, I just said in our writers group, to me, in all my years, that sort of combo duo thing has always been, I've been like trying to wrap my head around that for a fellow. But then back to what I was saying, like the individual artist, whatever role you play in that collaboration, whatever role you play in writing that play with music or that musical, apply with your artistry and your goals and your hopes, and then let the resources, like, sure, then you already know who you're going to work with because they're your collaborator. And I think that's a perfectly good argument. Or if you're in the like Michael R. Jackson book, music, and lyric camp, then it's sort of all one and the same. And like It's all that. So I don't think there's any hindrances around music as a thing or musicals. Obviously they are more expensive. And so we got to talk about like how best to use the fellowship resources. It's more that idea of like, where are you, the artist, filling out the LOI coming at this fellowship from? That's what I would say.
And the second part of the question was about our readers. Yes. Yes, we partner with Beehive Dramaturgy Studio to help us read all of the applications that we receive. So Beehive assembles a large body of readers. How many would you say they usually assemble for us, Michael?
24, I think.
24 at least.
Between 18 and 24, I think.
Yes, and with every round, oh my goodness, now these numbers are not coming to me. With every round, get at least 2 readers. And Beehive makes sure that, that at least half of the readers are non-white and half of them are non-male. Is that correct, Michael?
Yep.
Yes. So we try to make sure that there's a certain diversity, equity in the readership throughout, and Beehive takes great pains to address that with us if we feel that an application hasn't had an equitable readership experience.
And then I think the third part of the question that others have had is about choosing those 10 pages. So what we'll usually say is like, those Beehive folks, they are some smart freaking folks. So give them a stage direction at the top of your sample that says what they need to know to get into it, and then just go. I think one of the most common reasons for choosing the first 10 pages of a play as the sample is they think, well, that's what, then the readers will be coming in on the ground floor, all the exposition, whatever. The trick is that sometimes very beautiful, wonderful plays intentionally develop quite slowly and don't reveal themselves in the first 10 pages because that's not what they want to be doing. Or they simply need to have tons of exposition because that's the style of play they are, in which case, maybe language hasn't come fully into form as it's going to later in the play, or event is completely hidden because you don't want the event yet in the first 10 pages of the play. I will say for writers who prefer to work in realism, I think that's a particular challenge of realism, is often the first 10 pages might just be a bit of a setting the scene kind of thing. So I would really recommend you think about, I don't mean juicy, we don't need like the every table flipped kind of thing, but just something in your writing that excites you because you pulled off a monologue, you pulled off a piece of action. If you're maybe more language based, you've got a passage or a stretch that's, I remember I don't know if it's in your sample, Blue, but in your play La Rosse, there's scenes and then there's spoken word. And so like, maybe you would choose to sort of have a sample that would show some of both. That said, if you do write long monologues, don't just give us 10 pages of monologue because you think you're getting more words per pound. It ends up usually cutting against you at a certain point. If a writer is used to spending about 20 minutes with an app and all of a sudden your app is taking them like 40 minutes to get through, that doesn't actually usually go well. Was that fair to say? I don't know. Well, I said it. Okay. I think we covered Ella Rose's very, very excellent questions. And
yes, we have a hand from Jan next, I believe.
Hi, I'm Jan. Good evening. So my question, I'm actually just gonna speak because then I think I'll find what the question I'm actually trying to ask is. So I noticed on the application, there is a separate place that says resume, and there's a separate thing that is your letter of intent. So what I always am quite unsure of is there a place in the letter of intent where we're expected to be like, these are the bells and whistles, like, this is why I'm fancy. Or is it more, Is it more like what Blue was saying, where it's like, this is where we're getting like real and transparent, and it's not like I have the blah 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 award, or I'm best friends with, not that I'm not saying I would write that, but that's what I'm asking. Like, is the resume the place to leave the, like, if you want to know about my accomplishments, they're right here, and like, does it have any place in the letter?
Yeah, I think I'm hearing the question that you're asking clearly. I think that, so first of all, those accomplishments should definitely be in your resume. Like, let's start there for sure. If you've got them, you've got them. That's great. Everything's great about that. I think that the first question of the letter of intent, which says introduce yourselves to us beyond your resume, is trying to get you to be thinking about that very question, actually, and to think about, like, if I just say, I'm Michael Walkup, I've been the artistic director of Page 73 for this many years, it's like, well, we know, because you're the artistic director of Page 73. Whereas there's probably something more interesting I could tell you about myself that might tell you what kind of artistic director I am, or like how I read plays or something like that. And that's what I think you would be better focused on in the application for sure, as I think you're starting to intuit. What do you think, Blue? Did you just wow us with your fanciness?
No, no, I don't think so. I think but I just thought, like, you could be like, one of your challenges could be about something, one of your achievements or success things or your accolades. Like, it could be in there for a very specific reason, but it's not the thing that part of the application is asking for. Like, your resume says it already, so that's not a thing. Like, no. The answer is no. I didn't wow anyone by inserting fancy stuff in the letter of intent.
I thought of another potentially even more honest way to answer this. So we don't want any like sad playwright porn. That is not, you're not gonna like, it's not like great to be like, oh my God, everything's terrible and only Page 73 will help me. That's not gonna be great. At the same time, we're a company that has resources to offer to playwrights who need a real boost in their career, who've got the talent, who've got the commitment, and it's just like this next thing. And so if you like come blazing in the door with like, I don't need you, then like we might just agree and be like, okay, there's lots of writers who might. So, again, please don't take that to mean like the thing has to be this like, oh God, mamma mia. But like, I do think that we've been put off sometimes by folks who are like, I don't even know why I'm writing this. I can't think of any challenges I face, but I haven't been produced yet, so I'm applying. And you sort of end up feeling like, okay, I don't know why, like, it's an application, it's not a thing. So anyways, maybe that was a better way to answer it.
And Michael, on that subject about, I don't even know why I'm applying, but I want a production, or I need a production. Could you say a little more about that? Because we do often encounter a number of writers at that juncture in their applications.
That's a great FAQ to sneak in there. I mean, the fellowship is awesome. It's a big deal. It's a bunch of money. It's a really intimate relationship. I was just looking at my screen. There's like 2 different fellows other than Blue have texted me since this started. Like, it's a meaningful artistic home and relationship, but it's not a production. And if the main thing that you need, some wonderful playwrights, that's really the point in their career that they're at, that it's not about one more title. It's not about it's the production. I hear you that we have a whole company with a mission to try to get more productions out there, but that's not really what the fellowship is. If you're a playwright who really, really needs to be produced, as all you talented folks are, and you have an incredible project that you want to take on that's a little different, this is actually kind of like what Blue's application was, honestly. The play we're producing of Blue's next year that we've announced isn't even the project that you really have been talking about, like getting into with the fellowship. So to illustrate that they're really separate things. It's like, we love La Rosse, we're going to produce the hell out of that, and as the fellow, we're going to support Blue as she takes on both finishing Crisis and this other sort of big, exciting new thing that is maybe slightly in a new mode or a different like way than Blue's typically done before. And so that was like why that was a great fellowship application more than I just need to be produced.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, I think we've got some other hands. Michael, do you?
Yeah, I was going to really quickly address a chat one that came in a while ago, and then we'll do a hand about expected outcomes. Yes, every fellow will have at least something public, but you know, another thing to compare that it's not a commission. It's not page 23 ends up with no rights to anything, no residuals, no, that's the page 73 project. You can change your mind 8 times during your fellowship, which our fellows almost always do. But at some point we want to like be able to share your work with our donors and with the public and all of that. So that's the only expected outcome is something public, but it could be of something we didn't even know was on the horizon when you apply. So it doesn't have to be quite so like in January, I'll do this, in February, this, and then boom, like it's a little more flexible and touchy-feely than that. Okay, Janielle Kastner, I feel like your hand's been up for a sec. And then Jan, if you have another question, that's great, or your hand's still up. So I don't know if you mean that to be, so I'm just flagging. Okay. Okay, Janielle, hi.
Hi, hello. I'm Janielle, but I grew up in Texas, so it's Janielle. So I answered all of it. Yeah, you're good. Blue, I was wondering if you would feel comfortable speaking more about what aspects of the fellowship were like specifically really helpful to you or most supportive to you, whether they're like the obvious things or the less obvious things, because I want to get really specific about the kind of support that I want, but I sometimes feel like I suffer from a lack of imagination. Like I can only imagine kind of what I've already had. So if you would feel comfortable talking about that, I would love that.
Sure. So I think Michael brought up a little bit in, I have this play, and play doesn't even feel like the right way to describe it, but it's this project that I had in mind that is not my mode usually. Like I'm pretty like, I consider myself pretty conventional in like my plays at least. And so in this one, I knew I wanted to have access to like dramaturgs, musicians, choreographers, because I just wanted to create something that's like very like theatrical. And how do you do that without like without the resources or connections or networks to like be pointed to the right direction? So I knew that was the very thing that I could get from page 73. So that's what I focused on for like when we had our interview. I was like, I know this time what I want. I say this time because I was the semi-finalist the year before. I mean, finalist the year before. And then when I had the interview, then I was like, I want to do everything. I want to work on all my plays. And I'm just a little bit too ambitious, but I knew I was in a very different place this time around. And I was like, I know exactly what I want to work on. And it's this play, this thing that feels very daunting also. Like I knew I wanted support. I wanted someone to be there with me through like actually creating this thing.
Yeah, and I'll add that we've had super successful applicants that had a real specific project in mind. And I think I'm remembering 2015, Nick Gandiello, he was like, I got 3 and this needs this and this needs this and this needs that. And that level of specificity helped with, even though it was multiple things. So I think you can do multiple or you can do one successfully, but the specific, as Blue was saying, I think are really where it can sing. There's a question about age and eligibility, which we do get a lot too. And yes, I'm glad you're not sensing any ageism from us. We don't care about age. We don't care about MFA status, as we said before. We have such a specific career definition of early career, which is based on having received an off-Broadway premiere or not. And so any writer who has not yet had a fully contracted professional off-Broadway premiere is in our mission, regardless of all those other factors. And yeah, So absolutely, age is not important.
See a hand from Juliet.
Hello, let me see if I can get my video going. Hi, I wasn't planning to go on video, but Blue, you have really moved me and sort of caused me to rethink what I'm planning to submit. My question though is about resume. My background, the first 8 years of my career were in DC-based litigation, and depending on what I'm submitting to, there are often large chunks of my resume that wouldn't necessarily be relevant. Rethinking what I may submit, I'm realizing it draws from pieces of Chicago-based fundraising and from DC-based litigation and from these different pieces. And I'm sort of wondering, do you want my full resume or do you want a tailored resume just to writing?
That's such a well put question. I think we use the phrase playwriting resume, but not necessarily because of what you just described. I feel like I'm remembering more like the equivalent of an academic CV that was like 14 pages long that I felt wasn't helping the panel.
Right.
But I wouldn't want to suggest, now that I'm thinking about your question, I wouldn't want to suggest that experiences outside of the theater of playwriting aren't totally relevant, as I think you just described.
It's what Blue said, because I realize if I don't give you my full resume, my letter of intent might not make complete sense in terms of my perspective, because it's coming from outside of the last 8 years of my writing.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with, it's probably tailored in the sense that it should lead with or really let us know about the playwriting, but full resume feels good to me. And then sort of like I was saying about the sample, like it's an application process, which also means we have to acknowledge lots of them have to get read. And I do think there's something to be said for keeping it contained, but not full.
Understood. Thank you so much, and thank you to all of you. And actually, I have to say to Jan Yao, I'm from Detroit, and in Detroit, Juliet is always Julie. The T just becomes silent in the Midwest, so I super relate to that. But thank you so much.
Oh, a chat question.
Yes.
Okay. If music is involved in what you're applying for, can you submit a music sample? You'll have to email us about that because there's no place on the application form that you could do that. I think it would be.
Yeah, we don't have a portal for audio submissions built in.
It's very old school, doesn't it now? I would say email info@page73.org and that'll connect, maybe it'll be Kari who writes, or I'm not really sure. I think I would have some contextualizing questions around your role in writing the music or how it is interacting with the writing, because on a certain level, like I was saying in the answer earlier, like I would really be I would really be directing the panel and then later us when we're reading it to be thinking about the individual artistry of the person applying for the fellowship. Add a link within the script for music. Well, that seems smart. We do read it all digital. I think that would work.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I don't know every device people read on, but I read on an iPad. This leads me to want to give a little fuller explanation of the whole panel process because the Bs
I think that's a good idea. Okay,
so the Bs start. So we usually get like 400, 450 applications, and the Bs have this great panel, and everyone gets read twice. A very large percentage moves forward, like 60 or something, 50 or 60% move forward. They get 2 more reads. So by this point, everyone has had 4 readers, and we essentially move forward with what is something like 75 or 80. So the Beehive's primary responsibility as these really, really smart readers is to help really Kari and me, who are the primary artistic staff of page 73, sort of get this like delicious pile of, let's call it 75 or 80 of the best applications out there. Kari and I then hire one or two, I think it's going to be two this year, close collaborators who we trust, who might be dramaturgs or directors. And the four of us then read all 80 of those, and we have this really gigantic, epic, long conversation about choosing the semifinalists from that group. And that's, as I said before, how we get down to about 12 to 15. And from that point forward, it's all in-house at page 73. Kari and I reading more, asking for more materials from the semis, then the finalists. The finalists end up with a pretty personal, like, there's an interview, there's some like new pages that we get, that we ask to be shared. And that's sort of the complete view of the process. Catherine, you're back.
Yes. Yeah, I actually, I'm really glad, just first of all, that you hosted this session, because I feel like this has been really illuminating to the process. And it made me think in terms of the specificity and being able to actually name specifics in the letter of intent and of like what we would ideally want in a process. I'm just curious, just because I couldn't find information about it specifically on page 73 site, but I'm a CODA, I'm a child of deaf adults, and ASL and disability is a really important part of a lot of my work, and that I incorporate a lot into my writing. And I'm just curious if page 73 currently works with either deaf or disabled theaters or other artistic collaborators, because that's something that I find really important to my work, is making sure that there are multiple deaf or disabled people in the room when working on a project.
Yeah. I don't know that we have any pre-existing relationships, but the spirit of the fellowship would essentially embrace and be excited that would be part of how the fellowship would be successful for you as a playwright. And then we would do that, and we'd find our resources, we'd figure out who we want to talk to, and the good thing is most people answer our calls, and we would form those relationships. And then I also know the company would be better off for it too going forward. So that sounds really exciting. But yeah, any type of specific, I think to do my work, it would need this partnership or this conversation. That's a great thing to be talked about in the letter of intent, and probably excites us as well. If either because we do have the relationship, or in this case, or if we don't yet, but we would love to.
Awesome, thank you.
Sure. Andy Lee.
Hi, yes, thank you. I'm gonna switch my camera. Cool. Thank you. I love Star Wars. And my question is about, you might have covered this and I'm just like in space, but my question is about for eligibility, having written 2 plays or 3 one-acts, would the fact that I've written that number of musicals count, or would they have to strictly be straight plays?
No, musicals would totally count.
Okay. That was my question. And not that I would necessarily submit a musical to the application, but just for eligibility purposes.
Yeah. I mean, I will say about the eligibility, it's mostly a self-selecting thing. I don't know of that many applications where it's like, do you see this? And they throw it out the window because the page count wasn't right. It would probably unearth in other ways. That thing I said, that I don't know if it's controversial or not, but like you can be too green for this opportunity. It's an award for a very far along early career playwright. That's not maybe the right way to put it. But anyways, it will that level of whether someone is like far enough along, that will come out in other ways in the application, not so much the resume line by line going, I don't know about that.
Cool. Thanks.
All right. I think we have got the chat questions down, Kari. I've been watching those. How are we on our general FAQs that we sometimes pepper in.
Sure. What about New York residency, Michael?
Oh, okay. So it doesn't matter, especially for the fellowship. When we have an I-73 as part of the application, we're a little more focused on the I-73 folks being able to make it to the meetings. But the fellowship, really, you have to be able to be in New York for certain opportunities. We are a New York-based theater company. We see the value of New York industry and off-Broadway and all that. So the willingness to come into the city for meaningful development opportunities has to be there, but you in no way have to be based in New York.
And what about the question of taste or aesthetic that we get sometimes? Does page 73 have a particular taste, style, aesthetic that should be taken into account when applying?
No. We do not.
We do not. We do not.
We have really good taste, but we don't have like taste. Yeah. No, I mean, if you actually glance through, say, the fellows or the last 15 productions we've done, you'll find certain things in common. You'll find lots of things not in common. I think we're looking for folks who excel at what they set out to do. So, you know, Blue and Emma, who's the 2020 fellow, who's still living on this year because of COVID as an additional fellow. I would say that's exactly right. There's some things that their pursuits as playwrights share, and there's other ways in which they diverge, and there's no, and they're both really great at what they're setting out to do. And so no, there's no house style at page 73. There's no one type. I think we love people who love theater. I think that's a big one.
And Blue, you spoke to this a bit earlier, but do you have any advice that you would give to repeat applicants to the fellowship program?
I guess that is a great question for me. I think I agree that I realize that page 73 has really good taste for whatever that means. It's just like all the artists that go through there, I'm like, oh my God, I'm really excited about them. And so I am definitely a repeat applicant. And because I really was like, I really want to be a part of this community. I really want to be here. And I was thinking, like, is my advice to be, regardless of anything, I think you should be applying to it, because this is the only avenue as in to get into the other resources provided. Like the first time I applied, I think I was definitely one of the green people that Michael was talking about. And I ended up in the summer residency at Yale, which was like a wonderful opportunity because I got to see like artists who were further along than me working on workshops and like their process and like seeing, like hearing their plays, which is another story about like, I'm thinking about John and like the full circle, but anyways. And so every year I was just like, I'm gonna apply again. And I think the thing that's great is like each year I applied, I can see from like a past application that I submitted where I was growing as an artist and like how my letter of intent like significantly changed from the first time I applied to the last time I applied, when I was like, oh no, like I see myself being the fellow of this, of page 73. I definitely know that I have done like the work required and like put in all the efforts needed to like become the playwright that I want to be. And so I think that's the advice is like, you should apply and then like apply again, because at the end of the day, they're reading your work and you don't know how it's gonna pan out regardless of you not getting the fellowship. I didn't get the fellowship until now, but I have been with page 73 every year with some type of opportunity.
Yeah. That was such a great note to end it on. If folks don't have another question, we'll really honor our 1 hour time limit, which also would make me excited. So we can close by saying any questions that might come to you, or if you're watching this not live, please email us at info@page73.org, and we will try to get back to you just really as fast as we can, because we know this application is due in just 3 weeks on Monday, June 28th, 11:59 p.m. If you run into any technical problems with the platform, please also email info@page73.org. All right. Be very well, everybody. It was
Thank you,
nice.
everyone. Thank
Nice
you,
seeing you.
Blue.
Thank you, Blue. Thanks, Kari.